you for joining the Nutrition and Wellness Committee, or faculty meeting, I should say. We have Carol Petersen today, who is a pharmacist who owns a consulting business, The Wellness by Design product. She also is a certified nutritional practitioner, so that's very unique. Welcome, Carol. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Hillary. It's fun to have this opportunity. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here from there. And then I'd like to say that I'm finding this time of my life the most rewarding. I have the most independence. I see results. And when the first person comes back to you and thanks you for making a profound difference in their quality of life, there is nothing grander. But there's a huge need out there. I'm going to re-emphasize this, the need for people who understand hormones is really, really big. Now, I've spent like more than 30 years doing this, so I'm going to share with you some of my secrets. And my goal is to really give you a good solid piece of information you can use. So here's where I started. Pharmacy, maybe about then. That building on the right on the corner was Gwitt's Drugstore in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, my hometown. And I interned there. At the time, I had to get Leo T. Gwitt out of retirement from being a preceptor to take me. He was 82 at the time. He'd been very active in Wisconsin pharmacy, and I ultimately did a cover story on him in our state journal. My grandmother used to come to this square every Thursday and sell eggs. So we have a lot of history in this little town. So I had the corner drugstore experience back then. And I put in Earl Mendel. I'm a little jealous of some of our pharmacy colleagues who write books, because I do want to write a book, but I don't want to spend all this time at the computer. And this is one book that became very important to me. I was working at a Kmart pharmacy, and this book became dog-eared because I was so concerned about nutrient deficiencies and interactions. And I was really pretty lucky. I worked in a little bit poor neighborhood, but I wasn't so busy. I couldn't take some time with each of the customers there that needed some time and some help. So I was very reliant on this to guide me way back when. And ultimately, I ended up at Women's International Pharmacy. The owner of the pharmacy, Wally Simon, actually lived in my neighborhood. And this pharmacy started first as a clinic for PMS and as a pharmacy to compound progesterone in oil capsules. A little backstory on that. We were seeing the first of compounding back then. In Madison, Wisconsin, there was another pharmacy came out doing progesterone suppositories for PMS. So we did the capsules according to research done by Wayne Maxon and Joel Hargrove and published, using progesterone in oil capsules, 100 milligrams capsules 4 times a day during the luteal phase, and up from there. So this building, even though it's not the best picture, was the third location for Women's International Pharmacy, and we left the clinic behind. The clinic failed, but there was a growing awareness of the problems of PMS and how well progesterone treated those symptoms. And so this is the woman, this is back in the 50s. She published numerous studies. Once a month was her PMS one. She is the woman who characterized PMS and many symptoms. She herself had catamenial epilepsy. Progesterone did a great job in treating her seizures. She went on to write Depression After Childbirth. She was treating the most severe PMS patients, those who would be suicidal, homicidal. She also published a book of legal cases. She went to the government, and where a woman could prove that she was in her luteal phase and out of control and maybe killed somebody, it was not because she wanted to kill somebody, but she was the victim of this hormone disarray going on. And so she actually testified, I think, for something like 80 women, and either got them out of prison or got better circumstances for them, which is quite remarkable. That's how devastating PMS can be. So we embraced Dr. Dalton's practice. She used high doses of progesterone, like 400, 600 milligrams suppositories, after she switched from using injectable. So the doses were generous, and we too were generous at Women's International. And then along comes John Lee. And I do like his book as a primer for the importance of progesterone. However, John Lee also did us a disservice, and he promoted the idea that women did not need more than 20 milligrams of progesterone. That's all your ovaries made during the luteal phase per day. And that should be plenty for treating yourself. And on top of that, he also embraced saliva testing. Now, saliva testing's been available for decades now. And a real big problem with saliva testing is if you treat somebody with progesterone topically, your saliva levels shoot way up. And so much so that companies, labs offering saliva testing have created two levels, a normal level and a treated level. This does not hold up to scrutiny in the science world. You can't be making up a two-level thing. You can't make up a fictional level, which is just a range the lab determined. And if they hadn't determined that, women probably would have been denied hormone use based on a lab. And we're still in big danger of some of this stuff. So I don't like saliva testing when somebody is being treated with hormones as a preliminary diagnostic. I think those tests were helpful in bringing out some power to women and some medical practitioners like pharmacists, where you could demonstrate very effectively with saliva testing that people were indeed low in hormones. So we had many women go to their doctors saying, I think I have issues with hormones. And the doctors would just say, you're too young to have issues with your hormones, must be something else. We'll give you antidepressant, an anxiety agent, something for sleep, all the while ignoring that hormones very definitely can be an underlying cause. And here is a chart that many of us have seen one time or another, the menstrual cycle. But look at the black progesterone line, and this has created no end of problems. That black progesterone line is drawn that way to fit it to the scale of this chart. So progesterone is shown in nanograms per mil, and estrogen is shown in picograms. So really, you need to take that black line in your mind and raise it 1,000 times up. One physician I knew, she called me and she said, I would really like to be able to show my patients where the progesterone really is. She said, I can't get it on a piece of paper. So this is really true. But look at this. I pulled it off the internet. There are no units indicated. And this in turn has caused people to minimize the importance of progesterone. And here I want to share with you a big thing that I learned in those days of treating women with progesterone, very generous doses, to meet the demands of the deficiency symptoms that they were having. You notice progesterone drops, and so does estradiol. So we were all taught, pharmacy school, medical school, nursing school, we're taught that it is the drop of progesterone that brings on the menstrual cycle. During the time of treating women with PMS symptoms, it was apparent that for some women, they still had those symptoms 1, 2, 3 days into bleeding. Dr. Dalton's recommendations were continue progesterone at the high doses. These women generally tended to be super regular, and they did not need to drop off their progesterone to start bleeding. We have another concerning situation that will help illustrate this. We have an increasing amount of missed ovulations. So there's no egg produced, no corpus luteum, no progesterone. Yet women don't know they haven't ovulated unless they do an ovulation test. They will bleed without a drop of progesterone because progesterone in those cycles has not risen. So we have a bit of confusion about that. Women, because they've been told by their practitioners, they have to stop progesterone to bring on bleeding. And then they wonder when it doesn't work, what's going on? What should I do then? They also have problems with when you start progesterone for the first time. And I believe this is probably more like a function of area under the curve. When you get enough progesterone activity, then you will shed the endometrium. In the first part of the luteal phase, progesterone prepares the endometrium, helps prepare the endometrium to accept an implanted egg. In the second part of the luteal phase, progesterone's a secretory hormone, meaning it is preparing the endometrium to shed. So all these women, and their doctors are confused too, they start progesterone and all of a sudden they're bleeding like crazy when they've been taught they have to stop progesterone to have a bleed. So this is something that is confounding practitioners throughout the US, throughout the world, as far as I can tell, because I do some consulting all over the place. So this chart, I believe, is responsible for a lot of confusion with the hormone progesterone. Just to illustrate this further, just to show you, nanograms per mil for progesterone on the left, picograms per mil on the right. This comes from LabCorp. All those numbers, if you put in the same units, you need to move that over 3 decimal points. And look what happens. 23,900 picograms compared to the high of 211 with estrogen. That is huge difference, and further illustrates in my mind how important progesterone is. So then I wanted to share with you in this time several books that really transformed what I think and how I've been working for the last few decades. And this was one of them. This Dr. Rhoda Barnes spent something like 30 years. He's from Illinois and studied thyroid. And this is quite a remarkable book. I sat and I read it and I go, wow, I didn't understand that. And I didn't understand this. And I didn't understand this. He's also got a book which is very interesting about hypothyroidism and heart disease. He claims in the years of his practice, no patient who was supplementing with at least 2 grains of whole thyroid had any cardiovascular disease. Look at the prominence we have with cardiovascular disease. And in fact, he's one of the doctors who said if total cholesterol is high, it's a better indicator than the existing tests for hypothyroidism, that thyroid is a problem. I'd like to share with you a couple of other little tidbits that I got from Dr. Ray Pete. If you take your pulse, if you've got good thyroid function and you are not a highly trained athlete, your pulse rate should be in the 80s. Dr. Broda Barnes actually studied and put out the possibility that your body temperature is a good measure of your activity, thyroid activity. And indeed, in the mitochondria, with the stimulation of T3 active thyroid, it's responsible for two things. One is energy production, two is maintaining your body temperature. So with that in mind, you can actually be checking on your patients, guiding your patients to be checking pulse rate, check your temperatures. There's one caveat with the temperature is that later in the day, 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, your temperatures may drop, and that's the low adrenal time. Thyroid needs adrenal support. Even the PDR has a warning about using thyroid in patients with poor adrenal function. You've got to make sure the adrenal function is there first, or you're going to have symptoms with taking the thyroid, like heart palpitations, anxiety, etc. If you make sure that the adrenal base is there, no problem. This was another eye-opening book. So the discovery of hydrocortisone made huge ripples in the medical industry. And then we soon followed up with not only hydrocortisone and cortisone, which are bioidentical to our bodies. We created all these synthetic analogs, prednisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, and triamcinolone, betamethasone, so many. And we found they were like miracle drugs, produced wonderful anti-inflammatory activity. However, these were too strong and they shut down your own adrenal function. With using hydrocortisone and using it judiciously, you can augment your hydrocortisone or cortisones available without shutting down your adrenal function. And this book is very much meant for medical professionals. It's a highly technical book, lots of case studies, the successful use of hydrocortisone. Here's my tip for you today. What does low hydrocortisone feel like? It feels like the flu, that enormous fatigue, the aching of the joints and muscles, it's low cortisol. So it's the flu. The symptoms of the flu are low cortisol. In his 80s, he published a paper and demonstrated that the ACTH signaling to the adrenal glands is interrupted when there is a flu. So you can take something simple like the 1% hydrocortisone cream that's right on the shelf, put about a teaspoonful, kind of a loading dose on your skin, and those symptoms melt away. Why do we not all know that? But it can be really, really important. Now, I'm going to be working on an adrenal presentation, and we can be measuring cortisol throughout the daytime and monitor its diurnal effect, and that's pretty interesting too. But right now, Dr. Jeffries recommended 5 to 10 milligrams of hydrocortisone every 6 hours. He was religious about this in his personal life. I knew Dr. Jeffries, and we actually got him to do an androgen because, like people in academia, they're their one hormone thing, and if you ask them something else about it, they don't have a clue, and they don't even want to think about it. So Dr. Jeffries over time when his androgens fell, DHEA and testosterone fell, like in his 80s, he was developing kyphosis that I think he could have avoided by supplementing. We did get him to use some DHEA, thankfully, but I think he could have done much better with that job. I asked him, what about topical hydrocortisone versus Cortef? And he goes, I don't know. I never studied it. So hydrocortisone is actually one of the most absorbable of all the steroid hormones topically. So it's quite lovely. And the strengths that you get over the counter are strong enough. So it's a powerful tool. Here's another one. Dr. Michael Platt wrote a book on hormones, but then I think this is his masterpiece. And I actually got to know Dr. Platt as well. And he got delicensed for using hormones. And he started off on his own. He advocated the use of progesterone as an adrenaline dominance balancer. So one of the interesting things, so could I stop just a second? My power came back on, hence my radio came back on. Could you stop the recording, Linda? Okay, so there is a situation where a lot of people, men and women alike, wake up, they might get to sleep okay, they wake up in the middle of the night, and then they can't get back to sleep. There were some old endocrinologists who were also dentists back in the 30s. They call this liver insomnia. The liver did not store enough glycogen to last the whole night. So what happened then? Adrenaline shoots out to bring the blood glucose back up for your brain. And when that happened, you were really hugely alert and you can fall asleep. This is adrenaline, you're ready to go, you're all revved up. It's the fight and flight hormone. What can you do about that situation? These dentists said, put an apple by the side of your bed and eat it during the night, and you'll go back to sleep. And so this is a test I often recommend to people. It does bring their blood glucose up, and then your body no longer needs the adrenaline, so everything can settle down. There's another caveat with this. We are learning more and more about methylation. That's the primary detoxification pathway of adrenaline. And there are a large portion of the population have trouble getting rid of that adrenaline if they don't have enough methyl groups. There's another place where you can intercede. And progesterone. If you use progesterone there in the middle of the night, it does stabilize your blood glucose and you can go back to sleep. So I got very political and I was on the board for ACA. Actually, in my Women's International days, I became board member. And then I also became active with APHA and became a cover girl, to my surprise. And this came about because I helped establish the compounding special interest group. I thought it was a real shame that our largest pharmacy organization, often claiming like 60, 70,000 members, and they have a powerful voice in Washington, D.C., was ignoring compounding entirely. So Lou DiOrio and I got together and we created this special interest group, which is still going today. And thankfully, because compounding did need to have a voice in that very powerful political group. And on to other things. So I left Women's International Pharmacy after 27 years in 2020. During the time I was there, I actually didn't physically compound very much. I was usually on the phone talking with practitioners, talking with patients, and a good part of my job had started to become going to medical conferences and representing our pharmacy at those conferences. And in 2020, I was lined up with 20 some conferences for the year, plenty to keep me busy and going. And that all petered out. So did my job, which after all those years, I was angry at first. However, after I spent a month being angry, I realized it was the opportunity I always wanted. I wanted to be my own boss and create my own job the way I could do it. And so I started my webpage, the Wellness by Design Project. I've been forced to learn social media stuff. I've been actively writing. I wrote for Women's International Pharmacy, our newsletter, and our newsletter was well read, and we also used it at conferences to help practitioners in their office with the message they're trying to give to the patients. We wrote it in language that was easy to understand. Even practitioners like it, so they can reinforce what they're trying to have the patient understand with written material. So I've continued that. I've got my website just chock full of things I've written, podcasts I've done. I do a radio show out of New York City every Thursday. It's called Take Charge of Your Health. And we cover a lot of topics, but almost always I make sure the hormone message is out there. So during the course of all this networking, I became friends with Dr. Ron Klotz, and he's one of the co-founders of the A4M, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And doing this networking with him has opened up more and more doors. As I become older myself, I'm very interested in living my best life and living long and living well with good energy and lots of fun. And so with this particular friendship, which I never in 100 years thought this opportunity could come to me, has really enriched my life. And so it happened as I created my website and created what I thought I wanted to do. More and more doors opened to me. And so one of the doors that opened to me was with Quicksilver Scientific. And they have a patent now on a phospholipid nanoemulsion delivery system for hormones. And so my work with them has evolved into working with pharmacies who'd like to use this dosage form. And they have some of the over-the-counter hormones. So it's ideal for a pharmacy practice who would like to incorporate hormone counseling. It's a low startup pharmacy option for compounding. It's easy to compound. If you compound, you already have the equipment. Very short time is needed with staff time to do this. And it fills a niche for a delivery system that I think is it just gives you another option in your palette of what you can do for patients with compounding. So I've been doing a lot of that. My future projects, I want to work with people who are out there and they're teaching, teaching each other, they're teaching their patients. And I came across in this adventure, I came across some Facebook groups. When I left Women's International Pharmacy, the piece I was missing, I thought, was the option to talk to people all the time about what was going on, what the hormone issues. And I found the answer to that on Facebook. And what I found on Facebook, I found the failures. And this is what I wanted to know. How are we failing our patients? And I found something that reflects back to that original chart and back to Dr. Katarina Dalton. I've found women are, and men too, potentially, but I can't substantiate it, but women are getting severely undertreated with progesterone. And if your progesterone dose is too small, all your estrogen and potentially adrenaline symptoms suddenly balloon. Progesterone supports estrogen, whatever you have, and you add a little progesterone and suddenly you have headaches, you can't sleep, you're agitated, you're panicked, you might even go to the hospital thinking you're dying. And this has occurred. And I know from my Katerina Dalton days and PMS days, if you use more progesterone immediately, that will solve the problem. But everybody has to know to do that. We called it breakthrough. And we had patients using 2,000, 2,500 milligrams of progesterone, various dosage form, to get to the point where progesterone produced the calm it should be doing. Now, I know pharmacists have been trained by various groups, and there's nobody out there satisfying the need for those women and potentially men who need more progesterone. If there's a woman with hysterectomy and she's your patient and you think her symptoms would do well with progesterone, yes, they will. But she's been so progesterone deficient, she wouldn't have a hysterectomy if she wasn't progesterone deficient. And in that background, you're going to find some of PMS symptoms, maybe some PCOS in that history. And now what have we done to this woman? We're giving her estrogen, more estrogen, when that's her problem the whole time, and withholding progesterone. It's criminal in my opinion. So any woman with estrogen only, she needs progesterone, but you should probably half the dose of estrogen when you add that progesterone, and you need to put it in generous amounts or it's going to backfire on you. The patient will have a horrible time and she'll hate progesterone and she'll hate you. So my message to everybody here is progesterone is so powerful and so multifactorial a hormone. I think we're only scratching the surface of the benefits of progesterone. We just don't know everything we could know about it. And I want that everybody familiarizes themselves. And when your patient gets to that point where they are able to relieve these symptoms of progesterone deficiency, they are back in control. They felt like something's going on, they've lost all control of their life, and they're miserable. And to put people back in charge of their health and their days and their quality of life, it's a blessing to be able to do this work. And I'd be pleased if you all would take it further. So I'll stop here if there's any questions. And here's my contact information.
Thank you for all that. That's wonderful. I've got some questions. If you were to write a book, as you mentioned, you would love to do that, what would it be on?
Well, that was my title, My Love Affair with Hormones.
Okay.
My daughter says it's sucky. So
Okay. Oh, do
So,
hormone.
so I don't know. A book could be written simply on progesterone, but I do recommend and help people with as many hormones as I can. So it's there's a lot of work needing to be done. And look, I've been doing this 30 years. And this was kind of at the dawn, like this is dawn at Bocan, Peru in Panama. That was the dawn of compounding. It was the dawn really of using hormones. Everything was just getting started then 30 years ago. And now it's still, the demand is so huge. And the people who can help with this demand need to step up and do it. And I think it's such a wonderful opportunity of pharmacists because they have everything they need, and they have the knowledge base to get started with, and they could be doing wonderful job consulting. So I am doing private consulting, and I have, let's see, maybe at least 6 other groups who refer patients to me, and I have all the work I want. And I only work 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. And I'm making wonderful money and enjoying myself.
That's what it's all about. Here's another question. I ran into one of my naturopathic colleagues. She called me last week and she was saying that some of the practitioners in this area are recommending using progesterone capsules vaginally rather than just asking for compounded suppositories. I know that probably exists, but is there any sort of efficacy that you've run into with that?
Yes. Oral progesterone can be just wonderful. And as I said, we compounded progesterone and oil. Actually, we were precursors. There was no prometrium then. And we use olive oil. And we even at time rotated oils for a particular patient. So they didn't have the same oil all the time. That was their wish. They wanted to rotate that out. So there are a couple times when it's a problem. One is if you get extremely drowsy and dizzy from it. There's a certain amount. I saw one study, 10 women. Of the 10, 9 were incapacitated. 9 were fine. 1 was incapacitated by the drowsiness. And they determined it was allopregnanolone, which will create drowsiness as strong as phenobarbital, which is a big problem. You know, we weren't even aware so much with those PMSers. It didn't seem to come up that long. It was a long time before we put may cause drowsiness on the bottle. But if that's your patient, seeking an alternative dosage form is a boon. Now, vaginal absorption is very, very good. One of my professors at the University of Wisconsin, Joe Robinson, he developed that crinone product with Replens. It's basically a Replens base with progesterone added. So he had that. The vaginal absorption is absolutely wonderful, and you can do rectal, but the capsule, we used to also compound progesterone in oil in colorless capsules to use instead of a suppository. It was much less messy. The other thing I'd like to say about progesterone is that when your patient has candida overgrowing, and you see they have gut problems, they may have hiatal hernia, they have chronic sinus problems, they have burning and itching in the vaginal tissue, those could worsen with the use of progesterone. Now, remember I mentioned that progesterone does raise the blood level of glucose. Now you've got more nutrient for the candida to grow on. Also suppresses some of the immune proteins. And it does this as a function of pregnancy. As you get in high progesterone levels, the suppression of these immune molecules, and I forget what they are. I've never really made it a point to learn it. But that suppression allows candida to overgrow more. In that case, oral is not maybe the best way to use it. You may have better luck with vaginal, rectal, sublingual, topical, and anything but the oral. But you do need to go after the candida. The underlying problem needs to be addressed. So yes, I kind of like a capsule. You know, you can insert it vaginally. You can crack it open if it's an oil and rub it on your skin like a cream. You can hold it in your mouth and let it dissolve in your mouth, and you have sublingual. So with that same capsule, you have all sorts of dosage forms.
Thank you for that. Anyone have any more questions? If not, I have one more or a comment. I just actually ran into, so we do Dutch testing here. the pharmacy.
Mhm.
I do hormone consults, and I'm lucky to have, I'm lucky enough to have referrals from a nurse practitioner that I work with, and we work kind of hand in hand. And two of her patients have severe PMDD, like very, very bad. It's all, antidepressant resistant, and we came across, and when I was looking and on your website, I saw that you have a connection with Dr. Lindsay Berkson.
Mhm.
And she had an article with a lot of literature that's saying high dose progesterone has that relaxation effect. And traditionally, if we were to have that conversation and start this woman on 20 to 40 milligrams instead of going all the way up to 100, 200,
You're gonna kill her.
yeah. And so I'm like, it's kind of like jumping off a cliff. We're not used to that. Let's just start her at 200 and let's just pray she doesn't have any side effects or symptoms. And holy moly, it turned her life around. So I hate that we're just not taught that. It's just something that we've got to just randomly find, but it's so awesome.
Okay, a horrible thing happened in the late 90s. And I sort of discounted it back then. And the thing that happened was Prozac went off patent. And what they did for PMDD was they sorted out the emotional symptoms of PMS. It's just PMS. And they claimed it was a new syndrome. They even got it approved by the FDA to use Seraphim, a reduced dose of Prozac. And they produced a study, and the study showed like 50% efficacy or something like that. And that SSRIs should be the first line of treatment for this severe PMS. And it's a failure. And I belong to a number of Facebook groups on PMDD. I was going to mention it. I was shocked, because why I was shocked was I had to go back and look. And my opinion at the time was, well, that's never going to fly. Progesterone does that. But we've now had practitioners trained. This is the protocol: SSRIs, gonadotropin blocking agents, maybe birth control pills. And when all that fails, complete hysterectomy with oophorectomy, because horrors, progesterone is the absolute thing you must avoid. They are taught to avoid the very thing that will save them. And then they have the oophorectomy, and they are every bit as miserable as before. And then they continue more estrogen, and they are loaded with drugs that do no benefit for them at all. And so I've done private consultations for a few of these women, and it's so difficult because you're very lucky 200 milligrams did it. I have women that need much, much more than that to get to the place of calm, and then their life is transformed. And who knows what it's going to take for that particular woman. Then you have them on the drugs that do interfere a bit, I believe, with your progesterone therapy, and they really need to come off, but it's got to be slow, very, very slow, and the practitioner needs to be involved in all this. But you can give these people their lives back, and they have no life. I would bet there's suicides happening in that particular group designated. So I was just plain horrified at where this has gone. It's gone so far. They have taught women to fear progesterone. And if they do give them a little, everything blows up, everything gets worse for the underdose of progesterone, as I was talking about before. So they know they can't use progesterone. They're somehow sensitive to it. And instead of being taught that they need lots of progesterone, and if any return of the symptoms, use more, like within 15 minutes till it flips again, they need that message. So I've been able to affect a few big Facebook groups. Even I went to England and met one of the admins of a PMDD Facebook group, and it was so rewarding.
Do you find that these women need it more like days 15, 28, 30, or like month long?
They needed all month long. Now, remember that menstrual chart
Mhm.
where it looked like progesterone is flatlined? The follicular progesterone is coming from the adrenals. It needs to be 1,000 times more. And they are under so much stress, they've exhausted. So probably they're not ovulating either. They've exhausted their adrenal progesterone and they are in mess. They do need progesterone probably all month.
Okay.
And just monitor the symptoms. Anxiety is my favorite symptom to watch because it will flip. One of the pharmacists I worked with, he got this idea first, and I think it was brilliant. So it was Key Fang, it wasn't me. Repeat your dose every 15, 20 minutes. And we'll see where you are in 2 hours. Women flip. Where they were raging before, they're calm. And now I had a woman when I was at Women's, she called from the West Coast. She was threatening suicide. She had progesterone, and I said, okay, take a dose every 15 minutes. We'll talk within an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so we did. And she was completely comfortable. And she said, this just proves what I know all along. She said, I know it's my hormones. And my nurse practitioner wants me on Prozac. I don't want to do that. And so she was now good. She had new knowledge and she knew what she needed to be doing. Her nurse practitioner called me and she was very upset because I advised her to use more per day than she had prescribed. I said, would you rather have her dead? I said, yes, I recognize I did go over and above, but this woman could have genuinely killed herself. So it was difficult. She probably could have complained about me and she didn't, but at least the woman herself was much better. So it's a powerful tool. Women are getting some progesterone prescribed and they are augmenting it with over-the-counter products. There are products that have more in it and using creams. They're even been freezing progesterone cream in gummy trays, and then they use it as a suppository to help absorb. And so when we're talking about this group of women and how much progesterone they're using, we don't have any idea how well they're absorbing it. And when you serum is not a good measure for progesterone. It doesn't show up there very well when you use topicals. And you're getting results, but it's not showing up in the serum. Why? One, Dr. Frank Nort, who has Rhine Lab 24-hour urines, he said progesterone is so quickly diverted to all the progesterone type functions it's doing, it just doesn't hang around in the serum long enough for you to measure it there. And then like Dutch, look at Dutch. So they do estrogen metabolites. I found a wonderful paper with all of the progesterone metabolites. Why aren't we looking at those? Allopregnanolone is one, but I found the paper had about 6 metabolites. What are they doing? And what do we know about that? Like 0. We're so ill-informed about what's happening with progesterone.
Well, I think everyone forgets about everyone's focusing on estrogen because, you know, cancers and so on and so forth. There's probably no money behind those metabolites, right? So,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
no. Well, they did take aloe and they made it a postpartum depression a drug. You do it IV while you're still in the hospital. I forget, it's 4 or 5 days, IV allopregnanolone, and then you don't have postpartum depression. Hello, you could do that with progesterone too.
Yeah.
You could do it at home. You could, and the cost of that treatment is something like $40,000-$50,000.
Oh my.
It's incredible.
Any other questions? Well, I think this would be a perfect time to end then. Thank you so, so much. I love your story. I love what you've done. Proof to other pharmacists that there's other duties for us out there. And thank you so much. We've learned a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My pleasure.